Sorry, total noob here. Noob mistake. Okay, no problem. We should be back on. Let me know if you have any trouble hearing me. So this is where we left off yesterday. I had gone through a lot of the kind of early steps. So we talked about functional components, destructuring assignment, as well as JSX spread attributes, and we had gone into kind of loosely like proxy components, this idea that you have a component and it handles just like one thing for you, but gives you control over all the rest of the things. So that could be a component that just merges certain class names or styles or other props together for you, and kind of passes the rest down to a React element. So like this. Or it could be something that's a little bit more complex where you would actually pull like a class name or style object off of props and then do some kind of like fancy handling there. Talked about default props. And again, I kind of explored a little bit about how I would create a button now, which was just to have export a bunch of these buttons like this and kind of merge on their individual classes, but using that base CSS class button. So that's how I'd prefer to do it now, which is kind of different than the recommendations that I'd given before. Now, finally, we kind of closed on this layout component. Let me kind of boost the size up here a little bit. We had ended on this concept of a layout component. Now, where those come in, so let me find the document on that, is this kind of really small concept, but important one, the idea of like separating certain layouts that don't need to re-render. And I use in this example an element prop where we're actually passing in a component element. Now, in the existing version of this document, I don't actually go into what that is, and I think that that might be a kind of confusing concept early on, or something that people don't necessarily think that they can use in a meaningful way, where it's actually a really important concept for like all composition in React. So I'd like to flesh that out. I'd like to talk about element props, and I'd like to talk about component props separately. And then that way I can actually, hopefully in sections where I talk about, higher order components and render callbacks, which is not around here for some reason. I can start talking. I can talk about those specifically, and kind of just link out to the content that describes that pattern that's being used. So let me kind of reset up the project for that. I really wasn't liking this, having everything in separate files yesterday. It was kind of cumbersome because I couldn't see like how. I couldn't control the code where it was being implemented, which was frustrating. So let's just, since we have kind of a narrower focus today, I'll just do it in here and then move it out later. So I think where I'd like to start is a MediaObject component. I think that's a really useful example for thinking about this. So I'm going to grab that. I'll probably just grab a Flexbox version. For the uninitiated, the MediaObject is kind of originally this really cool CSS, this CSS thing that worked across browsers when, way before we had Flexbox, and it's this tiny little bit of HTML and CSS that is amazing and allows you to kind of have this little media object where you have some kind of media, like a picture, and then beside it have a some type of block of text or something. It was really clever. I think one of the cleverest bits of CSS I have ever seen. Now that's a lot easier with Flexbox. So in order to keep this example pretty simple, I'll just use the Flexbox version. Let's see. Okay, so this is the HTML and the CSS. What am I doing? Unexpected corresponding. Man, I'm so lost right now. I'm going to copy it again. So we have our function, MediaObject, block, return. Okay, let me line up all this stuff manually, see what's going on. Oops. Ah, there we go. Whew. Okay, so we are rendering out this media object that we were given there. So this is the CSS. I can just put this in line. So we have display flex. Let's see. So I'm just going to put this in a style object. We'll have to change things a little bit, but I'd prefer to do that instead of setting up. Apparently, I can't do my yank surround tricks here in Code Sandbox. Okay, so div style display flex line items flex start unexpected token. Obviously, we need to get rid of these when we're done with them. Figure. Oops. That's going to be margin right 1M. And then that last one, flex 1. Nope. It is so weird going from a traditional editor into Code Sandbox because I forget like certain additional plugins that I have for Vim. Okay, this is looking good. We need a source image to do this right. I wonder what they're using. It's probably some like cat API or something like that. Cat image API. Oh. Okay, cool. Let's get another. Just Google for a placeholder. Cool. So I can click that, and then I can change the URL to be, let's say 50 by 50. Cool. That's good enough for now. Awesome. So we got that in. Perfect. Let's do some text just to make sure that it's working all correctly. Perfect. Okay, so this is where traditionally you would have something like this, and you would have like a media object, and then you might be inclined to add additional props to it. Or maybe you would have a media object like this, and then you would wrap it with another component like function comment. And then comment would return a media object with certain things applied. So comment might have the image source, which we have here. Back to the top of this. Syntax error. JSX attributes must only be assigned a non-empty expression. Oh, duh. Okay, cool. So now we're passing that down from the top. So we'd have the comment image source, and then the comment itself. Let's grab that from, and this would be the, I guess, body. Comment. So this is like kind of maybe traditionally how we would compose these things. Now, where the elements come into play is it would be nice if we could have like full control over this. So maybe it's not always going to be a P. So it'd be nice if instead of that P, we could pass in an element to like, so that this thing becomes like a little bit more robust. It can handle like all kinds of things. The image tag, I think is less important. So I won't really worry too much about that. But anyway, this is how we would traditionally do it. We'd probably wrap some kind of like element around this, which is totally fine. But they're like a little bit tied. And what ends up happening is that as soon as I would need this to be more flexible than like a P, let's say I needed to have it be, maybe like a lot more ornate, have like a whole section with a heading, et cetera, then I would have to make a new media object, which is really not ideal to kind of like have this growing number of this somewhat very simple concept of just laying out certain things. So what I would end up doing is kind of maybe keeping this same type of abstraction, but actually let's kill that for now. And make make this a little bit more direct. It'll be easier for us to work with. Okay, so we have that abstracted. We have, so we're using our media object, which takes a source and a body. And as we learned yesterday, so right now I'm spreading, so actually that's probably a good thing. Okay, source, body, perfect. So I'm trying to think which point I want to get in. Okay, so what I really want is for this body, instead of just having it be text, I really want to control the whole element. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to pull that out, and I'll do body here. That should still work, but without that wrapping p tag. So we're not getting an error, so I'm assuming that it's working. Cool, yeah. And then here, we're just gonna pass in that whole element. Oop, I lost my paste. Okay, cool. So now we have control over that whole element. So this is like kind of like a basic element prop where we're passing in the whole thing. Now this is cool, except like part of the problem with this is that now I have to control this this styling. So that sucks, because if I take this off, I guess it still works. Admittedly, I'm not a Flexbox expert. Let's see why that is. Oops. Okay, cool. I don't know why it is. So now this kind of like this kind of addresses that concept, but usually the way that I would kind of handle this is kind of a little bit. It's a little bit more. So if I don't have the modules set up anymore, but I would additionally export like an additional kind of default layout for someone to use. So maybe this would be function media body. Let's just start with a div for now. We're going to change that in just a second. And then that's going to get our style objects with the flex one. And then we're going to use, we're going to take all the props, spread those out. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use that media body. And just to see if it works, we'll put like an H1 in there. Cool. So we can see that this still all lays out properly with the image on the side and this kind of like squishing down. We still have full control over this. So like if I wanted to line up this H1 at the top, I could do style margin top 0. I think. Maybe not. Man, so what you're learning is that I have lost all CSS ability. Apparently, there's no additional margin there that's squeezing it down. So, all right, I learned something about my incapacity today. Now, what would be nice is if we so this is the like an element prop. So we're passing in this element prop. Now, an interesting thing about this is that we still in this where we're rendering this, we still retain control over this. So all of our values are in this scope where we would have these values. We don't have to go through that process of passing them through intermediate components to get to this kind of like end stage component. So that is really nice. It also gives us the control to do this. We just exported another component that allows us to kind of have this default style applied. So this media body is applying this style for us. Now, there's a couple ways that we could kind of merge. There's a couple ways that we can make this more flexible. So if anybody wants to, they could kind of look at the implementation of this and say like, oh, well, I just want to do my own div and I'm just going to borrow this implementation and then apply the extra stuff that I want. Or maybe I want it to be like a section. So this is where the component props come into play. So if I wanted to not do that, if I wanted to give people the flexibility of using the styles from this component, but using a different type of element, I can take a component. I've seen this a lot. I tend to do this. I like it. There's a possible like spec for as with web components, but I don't think that there would be any conflict even if that got resolved because this component layer would sit above web components. Anyway, as is kind of a nice thing. So we would say media body as, and then we would give it a component. In this case, we could just give it a div. It's already a div, but we could change this to a section if that's what we want. Or any other component. So right now, let's just get section working just to prove the concept. So let's say we want a component. We want this to not render as a div, but as a section. Semantically, I'm sure that that's not appropriate, but we're just going to do it. Let's see. So props, we need to destructure our as off of this. As. Now, when we use these component props, we can't just do as like that. It's going to break. It's going to try to use like just like a DOM as component, which doesn't exist. Yeah, you can see that right here. Now, the reason that is because with JSX, there's a heuristic. So like anything that is lowercase, it's going to just kind of pass through as like a div or a span or whatever. It's not going to complain about it or anything. And then uppercase are the ones that are actually components. So this is going to be pissed because there is no as component. So we have to use this little funky syntax where we say we want as. So we're assigning this to like a local identity of capital AS. Save. Now our as component works. If I open up the inspector again and find that section, we can see that this is spitting out a section. We could change that to whatever we want here. I don't know, span. Apparently my markup sucks these days too. Okay, anyway, span. It's going to overwrite the kind of standard display by using flex1. So Yeah, so that is what it could look like with a component prop. So we got, so we're taking elements as props, we're taking components as props. This is pretty fine so far. Let's see. Let's do one more thing. If I were to make this, right now there's an assumption that the developer would provide this as, which is not true. So we're going to get an invariant violation if we don't do anything. We can use that default parameters again to do that that original div that we had. So this is starting to look pretty funky. It's possible that you've not ever seen some of the syntax, but so I'll kind of go over it again. This part right here is just a standard destructuring assignment. We're going to pull that that property off of the incoming object parameter. So that's what we're doing. So we're destructuring. We're taking the one property that we care about and assigning that locally to a lowercase as, and then we're taking all the rest of them. We're using rest props or rest attributes, rest parameters. We're using this rest parameters syntax to assign the rest of those to a new object called props. Now, because we can't use the name, because we have to use a capitalized as here, we need to change that name locally. So we say we want the property as, but we want it capitalized so that we can use it the way that we need it here in this in JSX. And then as a default, if nothing's given to us, we're going to use div. Perfect. Now, if that's cumbersome to you, if it's bothersome in any way, you could go the other route and, whoops, what am I doing? You could use default props, as we discussed yesterday. We'll say as is going to be a div. We still need this part. As token syntax error. Oh yeah. Cool. So that's still going to do everything. It's a little more verbose, but maybe it bothers you less than this variant up here. Okay, let's see. So another thing. Another thing that we can do, and I would likely do, is to do some kind of condition on this element. So right now, we're really forcing you to, with this media object, I'm forcing you to provide stuff in this way. So if we make another one of these, and I just provide some text, it'll work, but it might break in unforeseen ways because we're not actually applying that flex one. So let's see. So it's just getting added as a text node versus right here we have this div with the style flex one and having all that stuff. So that's not ideal. And so what we can do here is we can actually switch on case or switch on type. So if we had type of body, so if we get a string, we can use, let's see. So if it's a string, what we'll do is we'll actually use the media body component ourselves. And spit out that body. Otherwise, what we'll do is we will just render body like we have down here. Let's see, type of objects not valid as React children. What'd I do? Okay. Oh, shoot. It's a comment. Sorry, Lewis. Oh, yeah, no, I'm using Code Sandbox. It auto formats for me every time I hit save, but it also like jerks everything to the top too. So if I move this in, it'll kind of reformat, but then put my cursor back at the top. Luz asked, could you explain again why you pass media body as a prop instead of children? Sorry if you said it earlier already. Yeah, so you could pass it as children. You totally could. I have reservations about taking children when I'm adding additional children in, if that makes sense. So I have no reservations about saying like, hey, we're just going to render children out here. I do feel a little bit weird when it's like I'm going to insert this image and then also have children. I don't necessarily think it's bad. I think we could. I think I naturally have reservations about it. I like to have a kind of like stated API or like a named prop for anything that I'm controlling specifically. But we could do that. Why don't I'll explore that after I get this this working, because I think it's an interesting idea and definitely worth exploring. I gotta figure this thing out though. Okay, so what was I doing? Oh yeah, so I wanted to, let's see if I had a, let's do this. So here, type of body is an object and type of body is a string. Okay, that's what I assumed. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm rendering yo for the string, and wat for the object. This is truly how I debug. Okay, so if type of body is a string, what I want to do is render out media body with body. Okay, cool. Perfect. So that worked somehow this time. And then other time, must have just been a syntax thing. All right, cool. And so then otherwise I want to just implement, or I just want to render out the element that I'm given. So I'm rendering that out. So if we look at this in the first case, I'm just getting this string, and it's applying the styles that it needs by using that media object. Or sorry, media body. Come on, find it. You can do it. I inadvertently used Safari instead of Firefox for whatever reason, so I'm not as well acquainted with the debugging tools in Safari. So now where that was just giving us a child text node before, now it's wrapping that in this style element, and then where we're actually providing the whole element, that is the same. Cool. All right, so that's looking good. We can use both of these. We can provide this, do this however we want. I think this example, well, kind of complicated is like the right direction. I think it kind of demonstrates both of these concepts pretty well. Let's try something else now. Let's do that children idea. Yeah, I think, let me just think real quick and see. So something that we could do, and something that I would likely do, is actually no, I'd probably leave it like this. Okay, cool. Got that. Good. I think we'll need to take an alt tag to imply that here. Okay, so we were talking about children. How would we do this with children? So let's change both of these to now, because right now what I'm doing is I'm throwing away children. So if you gave me children here, that's like nothing's ever gonna show up anywhere. So the question is, how do we? Hey, Sid. So the question is, how do we kind of change this? So if we wanted to, instead of use body, if we wanted to use children, which I think is a totally reasonable way to make this API. So right now it disappears. Let's do the same here. So let's fix that for children. Objects. All right, cool. So now that we have this taking children, nothing happens. So that's as we would expect. So in this case, we can get rid of body. And actually, this might all get a lot easier. Let's see what happens if we just place children here. Whoop. Yeah, so that does make things significantly easier. You don't have to do all this magic that I did. Yeah, honestly, that's probably a better way to go. I think like the only thing is I personally feel a little bit of tension just knowing that I'm inserting other things, so you don't actually have full control over children. But that might not be a bad thing. It's possible that the ease of doing it this way and kind of saving the kind of like implementation complexity is maybe better for your team. Yeah. So where I feel weird about that is that if in this media object I'm giving like a source. So if I were to go this approach, I'd probably change this to image source. So that I can kind of have additional clarity that this isn't like the image element. It's just that this is kind of like it controls the image element. Yeah, I think that's probably the only change that I would make to kind of satisfy that weirdness. Except I broke something. Taking image source, applying it here. Yeah, so the question is using function as children. Let's see. Function as children comp could be possible, no? To have control over children. Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's maybe a little bit more. I think for this media object thing, it would be a little bit overkill for me personally, to kind of, because effectively you would be like handing it props and then like kind of giving the props all back and then allowing someone to compose that. Um, I think for this example of kind of like element and component composition, um, it I think this is getting pretty close to where I want it. But yeah, I think yeah, that would be a way to do it, is to kind of do the function as children and kind of pass in all the data and then get all the data back and then be able to compose those here. Let's see. Source. Oh, duh. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think that's looking pretty good for demonstrating these two concepts of element and component props. Or yeah. So I guess before we wrap this up, are there any additional questions? I'd be happy to answer them, or additional experiments that we want to run. I guess one thing that I'll do is that I would likely, I mean, eventually maybe pull all of these out so that you can compose your own media objects. So one of the nice things about doing this is that kind of down the road, instead of someone having to completely rewrite a new media object, they would still have the same building blocks that I used, but kind of they could pull just the pieces that they need. So, and this is a really trivial example. There's only a couple styles here, so this might not make a lot of sense to do this much abstraction, but it's a good exercise to see how you might abstract something that is significantly bigger. So we'll just do this, we'll call this like media container. Naming things sucks. And we'll take that div, we'll return it, apply all the props, then use that here. Whoops. Good gracious. Cool. So now we have this media container that someone, if we had this modularized, someone could just pull out the media container. They could pull out the media body, and then let's just do the image too. Yeah. Keep hitting the wrong button on this keyboard. So we're gonna do an image. And actually what we'll do is we'll just spread out all the rest of the props here. Now we can go to line 8, change this to media image. We can get rid of these styles. Yeah, the source and the alt are going to be the same. Cool, and that all still works. Now, if I was continuing to develop this, which apparently I am, I would want to be able to kind of control certain aspects of this. So right now, if we pass in our own styles, actually, let me do this a level higher. Let's say this one, we wanted the text to be red because red is the shortest color that you can write. So, so that actually did some really interesting things. It killed a lot of stuff. So we need to actually handle the way that style is being written. Yes, what's this error again? Image elements must have an alt prop. I guess I'll have to, in order to appease the linter, specifically give it an alt here. Now, okay, so this is again a case for like where default props would be ideal, because I really want to keep this where I'm just spreading out everything. So media, image, default props, alt. This is terrible. Don't ever just give it an empty alt tag. We'll just do like MediaObject. Named MediaObject. So that doesn't really fix the linter issue, which is really irritating. All right, I made that go away. Whew, these scary linters. Okay, now I can't even remember where I was at. Oh yeah, so style. So let's say up here, I wanted to make sure that I wanted to make the style red of this one. Well, I'm not actually handling style, so I need to do that. And I'm assuming that we would put it on the container. Again, this would be kind of like up to your liking. Now the problem is that we kill all of the styles of our container. So we're spreading props after style, which means that the only style that this component is getting is color red. So it doesn't get any of this stuff. We can verify that if you don't believe me, but you can kind of see it already. So yeah, so this container is getting just color red. So if we want to be able to allow people to apply their own styles and merge those in, we have to handle that here. So we'll take style, use rest parameters, and then we'll just spread out style here, which does not fix our issue. What the heck? So I'm not taking props anywhere. This is perplexing. Okay, so if I take that off. Oh, I did something else stupid. Hit me up if you see it. Ah. Okay, cool. All right, cool. So that works now. We're kind of peeling that style off, passing it to media container, and media container is merging it in with the rest of the styles. Put it back down here. I like it better there. So now by putting it after here, I actually give people control over these elements as well. So if I wanted to display that differently or align items center, I don't know how that would change things, but oh, wrong spot. So that moves it down so it aligns it with the center of this this item. So that's cool because now that becomes a lot more flexible. Again, I guess just for the sake, just for fun, we've got a couple minutes left before we hit an hour. Just for fun, I'll do like another kind of as component here. We'll set the default to div, which is the default that we have now, and change this to as right there. So now if we wanted to, anywhere that uses media container, we could say as, I don't know, section or something like that. And we can check and see that, yeah, that's a section now. Or leave it off. We get a div. Now the cool thing is that we could, this is where it gets super fun, maybe a little convoluted, questionable. I think this is fun. Let's say that we had a component. So let's call this a, I don't think we name, let's call this a point grid component. And I'm just going to build this up. So we'll do as div props, as we'll spread the props. Okay, and then just for funsies, we'll take a padding prop and we'll apply style. This is going to be super minimal, but just to kind of prove the concept. So padding is going to be, a pattern that I use for CSS is the, oh my gosh, is the 8-point grid. And effectively what the 8-point grid mindset is that you have this minimal, like 8 pixels is the minimum measurement. So instead of kind of like shifting things over like 1 pixel or 2 pixels, like as it like feels right, your minimum measurement should be 8 pixels. So if you decide to add padding to something, it's going to be an 8 pixel increments. If you're going to add margin, if you're, when you lay things out, they should all be in multiples of 8. So that's the idea. So if we had a component that did that, we could take a like a number. So like padding, let's set that to 0 by default. But then we could do 8 times padding. Okay, so now we have this point grid component, and all it's handling is padding right now, granted, but it could be more complex as you need it, and general padding, not even like individual size padding. Now in our media component, actually, let's go all the way to the top to see if this works. Oh, actually, we're not passing as along, so we'll have to do it here. So in our media container, we could say as point grid, and then give it a value of padding 2, and that should give it padding of 16 pixels. It does not. Oh, right. I need to additionally take any styles. Oops. Take any styles and then merge them on. There we go. So now what we've done is we've we've kind of injected this point grid component into our media container to extend its baseline capabilities. And this can go on indefinitely. So let's actually call this padding point grid. Okay, that still works. And if we wanted to, we could do like a margin point grid. Change all these. Oops, can't Command D. Change all these to margin. Then I could do like compose these together in box. I think I can. I may have gotten too deep because now I can't even think about how to do this. So let's see, return. Also, my family just showed up, so I'm worried that someone's gonna come in the door in any second. Okay, so we're gonna take style. We're gonna merge. Actually, no, we can just spread that out. Let's do that. Cool. So now we can do. I lost the thread. Sorry. I should have stopped while I was ahead. Forgive me. But anyway, you could just kind of like do these kind of individually if you needed just the just the margin. And there is a way to compose them together, but I am fatiguing. So anyway, yeah, I guess yeah. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, Twitter's the best way to hit me up. So I'm at Chantastic there. And yeah, I think that my goal today was really just to get kind of a decent example of how to, a decent example for element and component props, which are kind of glaring omissions on React patterns right now. And I'd like to have people have a place where they can kind of look those up and kind of see what the idea is there. And then also a place for me to link to when I talk about higher order components, render props, and layout components, which I think that we have a good enough base for that. So awesome. Thanks for hanging out with me and being here.